What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, just in time for Thanksgiving, I'm gonna show you how you can draw this Kawaii pumpkin pie from start to finish. It's all in real time, no time lapse, no cuts, no edits. So if you wanna draw along step by step with me, keep watching. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and draw this pumpkin pie. Starting out, I'm using a 3000 by 3000, 300 DPI canvas. For my brush, I'm gonna start out using my standard Inker Streamline. That's part of my cartooning pack, but I'm gonna be jumping back and forth between different brushes today. So when I switch, I will definitely give you a heads up and let you know when I'm changing over to. And for the color palette, once again, this is pre-made, so I've already got this done ahead of time. If you guys wanna download this and follow along with the exact same colors I'm using in today's tutorial, you can get it for free by heading over to my website, bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page, which I will link this down in the description below. But I've got this as a JPEG on there. Just save it to your camera roll on your iPad. Then once you're back in Procreate, go up to your wrench icon, go to add, insert a photo. It's gonna bring that in as a separate layer in Procreate, and then you can just long press each of the colors to select them as we go through today's video. So let's get started. To begin with, I'm gonna use this orange color on the top row, and I'm gonna start out just by drawing a triangle. I'll lock it in there, and then drag and drop my color in there. I'm gonna hit my arrow here to kind of move this around a little bit, get it to where I want it to be. And there we go. So we've got the start of this. Let's go ahead and get the bottom part now. You'll see this is kind of crazy here at the side, but don't worry, we're gonna fix that here in a second. So I'm gonna make a new layer here. I'm gonna drag and drop this down below layer 1. Then I'm gonna come back up to my color palette, select this second orange here on the top row, and drag and drop this in. Fills in the entire canvas, but we're gonna go ahead and do some adjustments here. So we're gonna come up to the arrow, we're gonna slide this in, slide it in, slide it in, and slide it down until we are lined up there. All right, so there we go. We're pretty close. Not exact, but that's okay, because like I said, we're gonna go ahead and here make some changes. So I'm gonna erase here to get these kind of lined up a little bit better. And then I'm gonna go ahead and come back here and erase here to get these lined up a little bit better. I'm gonna turn my phone on airplane mode since I forgot before I started the video. And there we go. So now I wanna not have these 100% perfect. I think the lines like this, if they're too perfect, are gonna look a little weird. So I just wanna kind of erase here. So it's a little bit more jagged, a little bit more natural there as it comes back up and around. Same thing here to the front, and get that erased. So there's that. Do the same thing here towards the front, just a little bit there, so it's not just a perfect line. Same thing here on the back. Now we're gonna start working on the top one. So once again, layer 1 here, using the eraser. That erased just a little bit. So it's just got not really jittery, but not 100%, a perfect line there either. We've got that. Let's do the same thing here around the back. Get this one in. Am I on? Yeah, I'm on the right thing. Pen's just messing up a little bit here. There we go. Then I'm going to switch back here to the other layer underneath and erase those overlaps there. Erase the overlaps here. Then coming back up to that top layer then. Well, number one, I'm going to fix this now that my pencil's working again. And then I'm just going to, again, kind of bring in just some wavy lines there. Not super crazy, but not perfect either. And clean up the parts where those match up. And there we go. We've got the start of our pumpkin pie. I think it's looking good so far. So let's add some crust to this. So I'm going to come back up to my layers menu, make a new layer. I'm going to drag this down underneath, and I'm going to come up here to my color palette, select this third one on the top row, drag and drop that in just like we did with the previous one. I'm going to grab that arrow and drag these in just like I did with the other side, or the other filling part. So we need to leave this one coming out in the back just a little bit because that's where the crust is going to come up. Now that we've got that locked in, come back in with our eraser. And once again, just kind of clean that up so it's not a perfect line and it looks natural and not just cookie cutter straight across. All right, so there we go. Pull this one up in the back too. Do the same thing back here. Now, once again, with my streamline selected, I'm going to start bringing this crust up in the back. Again, I just kind of want that shaky line, a little wave there, so it looks a little natural. Bring that in and lock it in there. And the key here is we kind of want this perspective here of the crust to follow along with the perspective that we've got going on with the pie filling itself. So now that we've got that part done, let's make a new layer. We're going to drag and drop this behind layer 3, and we're going to continue this crust as we go along. There's one. We're going to make a new layer, drag and drop that behind, make another one, fill that in, and one more. And drag and drop and fill that in. So there we go. We've got the start of our crust coming behind there. If you want to make some adjustments from here, you can select all these at once. Hitting the arrow button now and warp, you can kind of play around with that. If you have the perspective off maybe a little bit and want to fine tune it, you can do it from the warp menu there and kind of change it up and make it look a little bit better. I'm going to bring this one up here in the back. Just erase that up a little bit higher here and bring it out a little bit more. There we go. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set layer 3 now as alpha lock because I'm going to draw in an extra line here to make this look a little bit three-dimensional. So coming up to my color palette, second row here and second color over, I'm just going to draw in another line here at the bottom. So it's going to bring home that three-dimensional quality a little bit more. And we'll pull and bring this up here to the back. Just like that. So it looks like it's kind of cutting in on itself. So next up, let's go ahead and do the face. So we're going to come up here and we're going to make a new layer on top of layer 1. Looking at layer 1 though, I think I want to do one thing real quick here. Layer 1, once again, the eraser, I'm just going to kind of pull in this a little bit as well. That's a little bit too perfect of a line there. So if I erase that and then erase the overlap, it's going to look a little bit more natural there. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to warp that a tad bit too, just so, whoops, warp the triangle one just a little bit. Of course, if I change that, then I'm going to have to change that layer too to warp that down to meet up. Change one, it might change everything. So there we go. Now let's start on the face. So coming in on layer 2, I'm going to make a new layer here. I'm going to come back up to my color palette and I'm going to select this dark brown. This is going to be the eye. So I'm just going to draw a circle with my finger, holding down with one finger and then holding down with the other one is going to lock it in as a circle. Drag and drop to fill the color in. Going up to my arrow and using freeform, or uniform, sorry. We're just going to bring that down, make it a little bit smaller, and move it to where I want it. That looks good. Coming back up to my color palette then and selecting white. I'm going to come in here and draw in just a little circle highlight here. And then we'll draw in another one down here, just smaller. There we go. Looks pretty good. So now that we've got the left eye, let's go ahead and slide this to the left and let's duplicate. So now we've got two different eyes. I'm gonna bring this one over, select uniform, bring it over, and we've got those three blue lines there, so we know they're all lined up. I'm locking that in there. And now, of course, we need a mouth for this little guy. So let's go ahead, go up to our layers, making a new layer here. Select my kind of maroon color, and I'm just gonna do a big circle here, holding down to lock it in, dragging and dropping. Now the reason I did it up here is because I'm gonna use the edge of the canvas to kind of cut this off. So I want it to be a half circle, but if I just erased, it might go slanted one way or the other. Using the transform here and then the edge of the canvas, you'll see those blue dots here in the center shows the center of the circle. If we have those lined up with the edge of the canvas and then lock that in, once we go back up to pull it down, it erases anything that's outside of the canvas. So I know some people don't like that if you move something, it's gone. But for me, I just go ahead and use some of those Procreate quirks to my advantage. And I'm able to do stuff like that pretty quick. So there we go. And we know that that line is perfectly straight across. We don't have to worry about erasing and having it slanted. So now we need to give this guy a tongue. So let's go ahead and make a new layer here. And we're going to set this to clipping mask. So you see this little arrow down here shows that it's clipping mask to this layer. So we're going to select pink from our color palette. When we draw, if we draw here, doesn't do anything. It's only going to show up if we draw inside that mouth. That's what clipping mask is for. You can see that area that I drew out here still shows up, but it doesn't actually appear on the canvas. So now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and slide that to the left and duplicate. And then this bottom one, we're going to select that. Select our arrow and then move this guy over, shrink it down, and we'll have a left side and a right side to our tongue. So there we go. This looks really kind of wonky down here. Let me fix that real quick. Now that I'm zoomed in, I can see it. All right, so there we go. Next up, let's go ahead and add some teeth. So I'm gonna select white. You can long press the background or you can go into your color palette. And the standard Inker Streamline still. With my mouth selected here, I'm gonna make a new layer and that's gonna clip that to the mouth as well. So that way that teeth that I draw here is gonna stay right inside that mouth just like the tongue did. And just gonna try to get that as centered as I can. There we go. Then I'm gonna select the pink of the tongue and just kind of make a tapered line here for that kind of break where the gum splits those two teeth. And there we go. So we've got the face done. Last thing that we need to do for the base design is you can't have pumpkin pie without whipped cream, ready whip, whatever you want to call it. So let's go ahead and do that next. The only thing is, of course, whipped cream is going to be white. Our background's white, so it's going to be hard to see. So I'm going to select the background and I'm going to change the color here. Let's just pick something that shows up decent on the screen. That looks good. You can pick whatever you want to. It does not matter. You can see here I messed up and had some of those lines showing through. I couldn't see that necessarily with white, but I can now. So I can go back in here and erase. Or the other thing I could do is I could select that color and color in down here too. Since that's set to alpha lock, it's going to stay inside there. Same thing back here. It's popping up there as well. That I couldn't really tell just because of the color of the background before, but now that I changed it, I can kind of see some of those areas that I have to fix. So there we go. Let's go ahead and do this whipped cream. So coming back up to our layers menu, going to layer 1 and making a new layer. We're going to go ahead and select our color palette and white. And let's just draw in just a dollop of whipped cream here. There we go, kind of clean up the edge there, tip. And if you don't necessarily like the shape of it, you could always come up to your arrow and go to warp and kind of change that around too if you want to get a little bit more control over it from your original. So there we go. That's going to be our base shape, our base design. So now we're ready to start on detail, shadows and highlights, stuff like that. So before we start the shadows, I do want to add some details into the actual pie filling itself. So to do this, I'm going to come up to my layers menu, layer 2, the big rectangle. I'm going to select that and I'm going to set that as alpha lock. So I'm going to color directly on this layer and I'm going to switch my color here to, let's go ahead and use this middle brown color here. And then coming back up to my brush library, I'm going to go over to my texture pack. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and let's use specks for this. Now, the key here is if you're following along with this brush, you don't want to go too hard. You just want to go fairly light because all we want to do is have these specks pop up in here. So as I zoom in, you can kind of see these. If you go too dark, it's going to change the entire color of that layer. That's not what we're going for. We just want just the faint hint of those specks in there. And then we're going to do the same thing then to that top layer, layer 1. So selecting that and alpha locking it. We're going to go ahead and change our color here. Let's go ahead and use the color that we used for the crust back here. But once again, if we go too light or too heavy with it, it's going to go too light and it's going to blend in with that. So really, really light stroke on here just to get that kind of popping. You want to see it just barely, and you don't want to change the overall color of that layer. So there we go. It looks good. Next thing, let's go ahead and let's see. Let's add some of that to the crust as well. So if we go back down here to layer 3, and we set that already as alpha lock. Coming back up here and then using that second color here on the second row. And we're just going to go ahead and hit there inside there just a tad bit as well. That's it. Nothing big. Now we can start to add in some shadows and highlights to the face area here and kind of make that pop a little bit. So coming back up to our layers menu, I'm going to come to layer 2. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to set this as clipping mask. Now back up to our color palette, I'm going to select this brown on the third row, the first one there. And I'm going to switch my brush again. So I'm going to pop over to airbrushing and soft airbrush. This is actually pre-installed with Procreate, so everyone that has Procreate has this brush in there. That's what we're going to use for some of these shadows and highlights here. And you'll see here, I'm going to start in the center of this eye, and I just kind of want a shadow coming up out of the top of this eye. It's going to kind of taper down here towards the bottom. So I've got one there. Do the same thing over here. Just a nice little shadow that tapers down. And starting there from the center really gives me control as far as how far out that comes. If you started out here, you're going to be way up there, or you're going to have to drop your brush size way down. So that's why I like to do it using that technique. Then I'm going to add one slightly over top here of the mouth as well. That's going to taper down here along the front. Just like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and up the opacity here, and I'm going to kind of bring in just a little bit of a dimple there and dimple there to where the insides of the mouth kind of curve out there at the lip, upper and lower lip there, so it kind of has that three-dimensional look to it. Now let's add some kind of rim highlights going on. So back up to our color palette and this third color here from the top, what we use for the crust. We're going to use that for highlights. Once again, still using that airbrush, and I'm just going to hit down underneath the eyes here. Once again, just playing with the size of my brush. Just get it to the right size so everything shows up like I want it to. Once again, just like on this one, starting on the inside and working my way to the outside there to bring that kind of taper around. And same thing here on the bottom of the mouth of the lip here. Just bringing one around here. Now when I got coming up a little bit too far, I don't want it to come too far into where that other one tapers out at. So we'll bring that down a little bit further there. All right. Now I'm actually going to come in here with my blend mode, or my blend brush, and my soft airbrush here, and just kind of blend those together as they come in. So it's not as an abrupt change and they kind of fade in together there. Now I'm going to go back to my color palette here, go down to that brown again, still with my airbrush. I'm going to go back down underneath those highlights I did before. So adding a soft shadow down under here is really going to make those kind of pop out a little bit more. Again, just adjusting the opacity and the brush size to get it exactly where I want it to be. We'll see how that's really starting to bring those out. All right, so pull them back there. And if you think they're too dark or too light, you can always come up here, since we have these on a separate layer with clipping mask. Coming up to your layers and hitting the N for the blend mode, you can actually adjust how dark the shadows actually are by adjusting the opacity there. So you can change those if you don't like the looks of them. And there we are. So let's go ahead and work on the mouth now. So I'm going to come back up to my layers and layer 10, the left tongue there. I'm going to select this maroon color. It's the color of the mouth, so we need to be careful not to get too dark with this because it's going to blend into the mouth. But I'm going to set that as alpha lock and just bring in a shadow here, just really lightly. And then coming back to layer 10, the right side, alpha locking that one, and bringing in a shadow there. And you see, that's why we did these as two separate layers, because just doing that little shadow really separates those. It really makes them pop, and it looks really good. Now I'm going to go ahead and select white and just do a highlight here on the left, or the right, and then on the left. Finally, the teeth, we got to do that. So selecting the teeth, alpha locking the teeth, coming back up to our colors here, and I've got this dark blue. It's kind of hard to see there on screen, but it's next to that lighter blue. Use that and just kind of hit a shadow in here coming down, like that. And then selecting the mouth, layer 9, alpha locking that, coming back up to the color palette and selecting this really dark purple color here. Just kind of hit the inside there of the mouth as it comes around to just have that shadow fade in there. All right, pull them back out. That's what we're left with. I think that's looking really good. I like it so far. So next up, let's add some more shadows here. Let's kind of make these pop first, the back of the crust. So let's start with this top layer 4. We're going to alpha lock that layer. We're going to come back into our color palette here, and we're going to select this second brown here on the bottom row. And I'm going to start to bring in a shadow here. You're going to see, once again, this is going to separate those different layers that we did. That was why that we did these all in separate layers. I'm going to select this one and alpha lock it. Getting the shadow to look like this would be pretty hard by hand. It would take some time. It is possible, but this just makes it so much easier, so much faster by doing these separate layers. That's why we did it. Layer 6, alpha locking this one. Same thing here. Just bringing that shadow up from there and bringing it down. Got that nice taper in there. And then I'm going to come back in here with this darker brown and just reverse this again by adding another shadow in there. This one here isn't coming down all the way at the bottom, so I need to extend that. So with that, actually, I'm just gonna grab this one and warp it. If I go up to that there, you just grab that and warp it, so that way we don't mess up anything there. I'm gonna turn off alpha lock to fill in. I've got a little bit of a missing section right there. Go back in with my streamline. Fill that in. Or maybe it's not filling in. Is that the... Oh, that's actually the pumpkin pie top showing through. So I can just erase that. Sorry for the confusion there. So, all right, there we go. Let's go ahead and go back then to layer 5. Grabbing that darker brown here, going back to airbrush, and hitting that again. Layer 4, same thing. That darker one, just hitting that again, just makes these pop out even more. I need to alpha lock this one again. I did not do that before. Oh my goodness. I turned off alpha lock to fix that and then forgot to turn it back on. Alpha locked again, there we go. Let's try this one more time. And then layer 3, I'm going to do the same thing here, just kind of add some more to this one as it comes back around. Be a little bit too dark there. All right, so there we go. Now, since this pumpkin pie is in there, I kind of want to give an overall shadow here. Instead of trying to line these up from one layer to the next layer to the next layer, I'm just going to pinch all these together. And we're going to color directly on that layer. So with that layer selected now, with that same brown, I'm just going to come in here and start hitting the bottom where that pumpkin pie filling kind of meets back there. Start hitting this. And then I'm going to come back into with that lighter brown. That again. So we got some different values in there, it kind of changes as we go. And I'm going to bring that down and around and continue that shadow in, down, and around here where that meets, just so it makes it look like it's sitting on top of there. Now I'm going to come back in to my layer 2, so the body section here. My color, I'm going to come in with that dark brown on the second layer, or the second row here. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the bottom of this. I'm just going to start to bring in a shadow down here. Up and around the back. We do the same thing then. A little light shadow here around the top. Just like that. Now for the top layer here, layer 1, I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to change over though to this second color on the second row. I'm going to hit in just a little bit of a shadow there on this one. And then once again, coming in with that other brown on the second row. Going back over that just a tad bit. Right there. And then also coming back in here where that meets that crust back here. And kind of fading that up towards the front. All right. There we go, and I think I'm going to lighten that up just a tad bit back here. Add in some separate values there too. Here it's just really important to get the right size brush so it does blend pretty well and you're not having a noticeable change. You just want a nice shift in those values. All right, so that looks good. Next up, let's go ahead and work on the whipped cream there. So let's go to that one. Let's alpha lock this one. So select alpha lock here, back up to our color palette, and this light blue, we're going to hit the back side of this guy here. Kind of have this come up in the center there. I kind of want this to taper around, so I'm going to select white and come back in to remove that. Once again, we're alpha lock, so we can't use eraser on this. We need to come back in with that original color. Select that blue again and kind of rebuild up some of that. Also going to use the blending smudge tool there, and we'll smudge some of this around too, just to give it more kind of airy feel to it. So there we go. And I'm going to come back up to my color palette, select that darker blue here that we used on the teeth, and then going back down and around, this is going to bring in those shadows even more that we just did. So we'll go heavier here on the back side. All right. And there we go. So it looks pretty good. I like the look of it. Go a little bit heavier here on the bottom where it connects to the pie, but of course, just looks like it's kind of sitting, floating there. So let's add a little bit of a shadow there on the pie. So layer 1 again. We're going to select that one. We're going to come back up to our color palette, and let's go with that middle brown here. Just bring in just a shadow there. Fades as it goes further out, and then we'll come back in with this darker brown here and kind of hit more underneath it, closer to where it connects there. All right, so that looks good there. Last thing I want to do on that part is that layer 1 with the triangle, going back in with white, dropping my opacity down. Just want to add in some separate values of white here, kind of for highlights, and just so it's not all the same color across there. All right, so that looks good. Let's do some more white too back here. I think with that though, layer 6, the crust, I'm going to switch back to my texture brush using the specks here. Just going to throw in some highlights here with just that speck brush, just so that doesn't look like a plain flat color sitting back there. All right, so there's that. One more time then with this dark brown here. I'm going to come back into layer 1, and with my airbrush, just hit this one more time where those connect. Same thing with this one where those connect. Just bring that home a little bit more. So, all right, there we go. Let's go ahead now and just do a quick little background here. So I'm going to turn this back to white. I'm going to select this blue color here for my color palette. I'll make a new layer. Drag this down below layer 6, and then with my standard anchor streamline once again, I'm just going to make a funky shape around here that we can fill in. Using my arrow here, just kind of using warp to bring it around, make it fit the design a little bit better. Not like that, as it jumped. I think that's pretty good. And then alpha locking this, I'm gonna go ahead and select white and throw a texture in there too. So once again, back to my texture pack. I think feathered crosshatch, I'll just throw in a feathered crosshatch around here just so it's got a little something going on there in the background. I think that looks good. And then finally selecting just a dark color here and making a new layer. I gotta sign this guy now that we're done. And that is it for the pumpkin pie, just in time for Thanksgiving. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. Also, if you guys do any of the tutorials, take part in these and do designs based on them, and you post them online, if you're on Instagram or Twitter, definitely tag me at BJDell so I can check them out. I want to see what you guys are working on. Or if you're on Facebook, I've got a group over there called Keep Creating, a group for artists artists by artists, which I will link in the description below. You can share your designs based on these tutorials over there, or you can share anything art-wise that you're working on. That's what I made it for, and it's a place where you can share and show off your work. Give feedback, get feedback, meet new people. It's an awesome place to be. I want you guys to be a part of it, so hop on over and join. And that's it for me. So until next time, keep creating.